Hi class, welcome back. This is chapter 13, Forest Resources. Here are learning objectives, and again, you can follow along with the notes, which are all in Canvas under Files. This is just an opening video talking about deforestation that I'll let you guys search for and watch on your own. So we'll start with the tragedy of forest loss in Haiti. There was a lot of logging and rubber plantations that led to deforestation in this third world country. If you're wondering where Haiti's located, it's on the island of Hispaniola, so it's on the west side of the island, and the Dominican Republic is on the east side. Political instability reduced tourism during this time and led to extreme poverty in the area, which further led to more deforestation or loss of forests. As of 1990, most of Haiti was completely deforested, and less than 3% of Haiti supports forest. This causes very low water quality, flooding, and landslides. The tropical storm Jean brought heavy rains to the island of Haiti. This produced flash flooding in Haiti's deforested watersheds that resulted in the loss of thousands of lives and extensive property damage to Haiti. The same thing happened with the Port-au-Prince earthquake back in early 2000. That earthquake caused a lot of landslides, and because there were no forests, no roots to uphold the land, there were a lot of landslides and flooding as well. This is the Haitian Dominican Republic border, and I think this is such a cool picture. The countries of Haiti and the DR are located right next to each other. There's a river channel that forms the boundary between the deforested Haiti on the left side and the Dominican Republic on the right side. The Dominican Republic still has over 60% of its forests, but you can see how just bare that left side of the ridge looks from the Haiti side. Deforestation and subsequent erosion have left Haitian soils with little organic material or nutrients, and as a result, these steep, poorly terraced slopes support only meager crops. Rural Haitians depend on domesticated animals, especially goats, for their protein. However, these animals contribute to deforestation by eating most of the tree seedlings. So let's look at the value of forests in general all over the world. This is a topic near and dear to my heart because my dad worked for the United States Forest Service for over 45 years. He just retired. So I have a deep appreciation for the Forest Service and what forests do for the world. Forests contain 75% of the world biodiversity, and these are some ecosystem services that forests provide, and you can write them there under the first part of your notes under letter A. Forests help with flood prevention, and that's because their roots sink extremely deep into the soil, so they keep the soil together. To help with erosion due to flooding. They also help uptake water from rains, so they also help with flood prevention that way. They store carbon in their leaves. They're a source of recreation. The United States National Forest Parks has tons of campgrounds. They help supply wood and paper, and they increase air and water quality. Forests, plants, trees in general take in carbon dioxide, and they create oxygen. As water flows through a forest watershed, trees moderate its flow and remove dissolved minerals from it. Wood products. The wood extracted from the Earth's forest is primarily used for fuel, paper, and burning materials. And those are your three blanks under number 1 in wood products. Fuel, paper, and burning materials. There's about 3.4 billion cubic meters of wood per year. 53% of it is for fuel, 30% of it roughly is for building material, and about 16% of it is for paper. And again, those proportions can vary by region and what each country needs. This is a look at global wood use worldwide. Again, most of it is for fuel, lumber, and you can see how most of it's used for paper there. Charcoal is produced by burning wood in special kilns that provide only limited oxygen. So charcoal is produced from wood. This is a look at trucks loaded with teak logs that have been cut illegally from old-growth tropical forests. They're a common sight on Myanmar roads, and each log is worth hundreds of dollars. So this causes or plays into the role of deforestation, illegally cutting down these precious wood that have taken literally hundreds, maybe thousands of years to grow. Producing paper comes from timber. You chop it up, and then you mechanical or chemical pulp it together to create a product. So that's how paper is produced. And wastewater from a paper mill, like the one we just looked at, can pour directly into this lake in China, and such pollution has severely damaged the lake's ecosystem. So we always have to be aware of paper production and water pollution. If we look at non-wood forest products, a lot of non-wood forest products come from forests themselves. Things like rubber, food items, maple syrup from trees, wild nuts and berries, herbs and spices, and other pharmaceuticals. And this is a look at a graph showing that more than just wood comes from the forests, and the approximate economic value of what comes from them. So it's kind of interesting to see pharmaceuticals, mushrooms, ginseng, wild nuts and fruits, gums and raisins, maple syrup, and cork. Here's natural rubber extraction. Latex is tapped from rubber trees, and that provides nearly half of the world's rubber, although some latex is harvested from trees. In natural forest ecosystems, most of it actually comes from plantations. So let's look at your next part of your notes then, 13.2, forest growth. A forest's value is derived from pattern of growth, and forests are considered at three levels: as individual trees, as forest stands, which are communities of trees, and forested landscapes. The life of an individual tree begins as a seed. That's your first blank. And the seed of a tree includes the embryonic root, shoot, and leaves surrounded by a nutritive tissue and a protective seed coat. The life of a tree begins as a seed. That's your first blank. Then as we move on, the seeds of conifers grow into cones, and the seeds of angiosperms grow in flowers that are eventually surrounded by fruit. So those are your next two blanks. Conifers grow into cones, and angiosperms grow in flowers that are eventually surrounded by fruit. Here's a look at as an example of a conifer tree and also an angiosperm tree, such as a tulip poplar, where the seeds are produced in the flowers. Then we talk about primary growth and what that means. Primary growth is the upward and downward growth of the tree itself, so it's growth at the tips of the shoots and the roots. And that's your first blank under number 2 in forest growth, primary growth. And then if you go on to the next page of your notes, we talk about phlegm and xylem. These are vessels that transport water and sugar throughout the tree. The sugars are transported down the stem to the roots in a thin layer of specialized tissue called phloem, P-H-L-O-E-M, and a tree's roots absorb water and mineral nutrients from the soil and then transport them up the stem to specialized tissue called xylem. This is a look at a tree stem cross-section. Most of the interior of a tree stem or bole is composed of xylem, and phloem, the tissue that transports food and nutrients up and down the tree, forms a thin layer just beneath the bark. And then you see the annual rings of the tree, and scientists use that to estimate the age of the tree. The increase in growth is called secondary growth, or the increase in girth, excuse me. So under number 4, your blank, the increase in girth, which is the increase in diameter through those annual rings, is called secondary growth. Then if we look at the life history of a forest stand, which is a community of trees, in the establishment stage, tree seedlings germinate on the recently cleared ground, and then competition for soil resources such as light and water becomes more intense. So this starts the next stage called the thinning stage. And then as the larger trees die, they leave gaps in the forest canopy, and the total biomass may decline when those large trees die, and this denotes the beginning of the transition stage. And then very large old trees and abundant fallen woody debris characterize the old growth stage of forest development. And we can see pictures here showing all four stages. So if we work our way from top to bottom, we have the establishment stage, the thinning stage, the transition stage, and then the old growth stage is characterized by the picture at the bottom where you'll have living trees and abundant logs and understory. Here we can see how forest landscape will change, usually through the course of fires. Between 1700 and 1740, fires burned over half of the forest landscape of the Yellowstone Plateau. In 1740, the landscape was predominantly covered by establishment and thinning stage forest, and by 1850, transition forest patches became the most dominant. And then just prior to the extensive 1988 Yellowstone fires, old growth forest patches had become the most abundant forest stage on the landscape. Those old growth forest patches would provide great kindling and great firewood for forest fires. So you can kind of see the cycle of fires and how it changes as it goes through the different stages of forest development. As we look at deforestation, this brings us to the bottom part of your notes, 13.3. Deforestation is your first blank. That is the removal of forest cover to an extent that allows alternative land uses. So more simply put, deforestation is the process in which humans replace a forest with something else, such as agriculture, pasture, or pavement. Each year, about 0.2% of the world's forests can disappear, and it can be driven by multiple factors, usually agriculture, unsustainable harvest, road construction, and other urban development. As we look at the pace of deforestation quickening, we'll look at the causes of deforestation, and this takes us to your third page of your notes. We have agricultural expansion, where in tropical regions the conversion of forested land to cropland and pasture accounts for more than half of all deforestation. We have wood harvest. More than 90% of the fuel wood is consumed in underdeveloped countries where wood is the most important source of energy for heating and cooking. So most of deforestation will be caused by wood harvesting. And then we'll get to road and urban development on the next slide. Paper demand is also clearing old growth for fast-growing pulp trees. This is a look at the loss of Ireland's forest. This is in the Beg Mountains in Ireland. They were once covered by a dense forest, but between 1600 and 1800, this forest was systematically cut for fuel and shipbuilding. Much like some of the ships you might see here, the development of Europe's navies contributed to widespread deforestation. 6,000 mature oak trees were required to build one of these single fighting ships. 6,000 mature trees. Shifting agriculture, this is a mosaic of landscape patches in Indonesia. It's the result of agriculture shifting. The lighter colored patches are being actively farmed, and other patches have been abandoned and are undergoing succession back to forest. This leads us to our last two causes of deforestation in your notes. Roads and urban development can lead to deforestation. It's a small portion of global deforestation, but it still leads to some deforestation. And then economic and political causes such as agriculture subsidies, timber concessions, corruption, illegal logging. A lot of it can come down to politics as well. This is a look at how roads, there's a newly constructed road seen in 1975, and by 2001, each little lighter green line you see is another newly constructed road. This is a satellite photograph in a portion of the Amazon basin in the Brazilian state of Rondônia between 1975 and 2001. So how can deforestation be halted? This is slide 37. You can write your own notes down here. I give you multiple strategies
With improved agriculture practice, maybe we don't have to cut down as much of our trees. With managing the population in forested regions, maybe we can encourage people to live in a place where they don't need to cut down trees to build a home. Reducing the demand for virgin wood or young wood, especially in cases where wood is used for fuel burning and heating purposes. Just managing the forested sustainably, and that's one thing the United States Forest does. If they do, cut down old trees because they want to reduce some of the underlying canopy to reduce fires, they'll plant new trees, such as reforestation, another strategy. And then just sustainable economic development. Again, where should people be building their homes, and out of what material to try to sustain the forest that we do have. Many countries have laws to slow deforestation. To verify their success, we can use satellite images, which are pretty cool. GIS software can be used to determine if forests are gained or lost. And Brazil is a country that has actually cut its deforestation rate in half. But there's been a 2 to 3-fold increase in Indonesia, Malaysia, Paraguay, and Zambia. So this is a look at an image map, forest loss and gains over parts of Sumatra, Indonesia. Between 2000 and 2012, mixed indicates areas where forest was lost, but subsequently regrown. And note that some of the most extensive loss was in a national park, which you think would be completely illegal, which is kind of interesting. So this leads us to forest degradation. And what is that? Forest degradation brings us to our final blank on the bottom of page 3 of your notes. It occurs when changes in forest structure and composition diminish biodiversity or key ecosystem services. Logging and other human activities are simplifying once complex and diverse native forests. Agriculture, roads, and urban development are dividing forest tracts into ever smaller pieces and preventing the migration of forest species. So they're looking at forest degradation, cutting, high grading, fragmentation, fire suppression, and even non-native species that are causing forest degradation. This is how fire suppression actually creates a risk. This sequence of photos was taken in the same Ponderosa pine tree stand during the last century. Prior to 1900, frequent fires in the understory kept the stand open. And by 1949, in the absence of fire, young trees had invaded the understory. Today, if a fire ignites in this stand, it will likely be very severe because of all the old growth that exists there. So this is what firefighters do when they do controlled burns. They're trying to burn off a lot of the understory, so if there would be a fire, it wouldn't catch fire on all the old growth trees that are there. This is the 2013 rim fire that burned about 104,000 hectares in the Sierra Nevada region of Central California. Maybe some of you remember this. This was back in 2013. It includes a large area in the northern part of Yosemite National Park. And as you can see from the satellite image, smoke from the blaze actually stretched into Nevada. The size and severity of this fire, which was unprecedented in the Sierra Nevada, was attributed to a combination of severe drought leading up in those years and great quantities of brush and other flammable materials that had accumulated during years and years of fire suppression. Here's a moth caterpillar. They feed on the leaves of many trees, often completely defoliating them or taking their leaves away. Over several years, such defoliation can actually result in the death of trees. So how do we define sustainable forest management? We look at allocation, which is the management of the location and relative amounts of different forest uses. We look at harvest, which is the extraction of goods or services from a forest. We look at clear cutting, which is the complete removal of forest canopy trees. This is the most controversial harvest practice and could lead to erosion, flooding, and effects on wildlife. And then there's seed cuts, which are uneven aged management. Here's a look at forest corridors. showing how the corridors of forests across this landscape provide migration routes for a variety of forest species, thereby helping to maintain biodiversity. Here's a look at Unsustainable Harvest. Clear-cutting forest on steep terrain and fragile soils can produce severe erosion and very slow rates of reforestation, such as what you see in the top picture. And the loss of forest from such landscapes increases runoff when rain flows down that mountain. Selective clear cutting, as you can see on the bottom picture, however, may be inappropriate on gentle slopes to regenerate forests in which the dominant trees, like these pines, grow best in full sunlight. Here we have rationing and investments. Rationing is the blank under rationing number 2. It's the process of determining the amount of forest goods or services to be used by humans. In intensively managed forests, rationing of wood harvest is determined by rotation time, which is the average interval between successive cuts. In investments, we ask ourselves the question, what action should be taken to restore and maintain forest health and productivity? And investment, specifically, on the top of your 4th page of notes, is the wide array of management strategies used to restore, maintain, or protect a forest's capacity to provide goods and ecosystem services. Some of those actions might be understory thinning or replanting of trees. So this picture shows short and long rotation times of eucalyptus trees on the left, which are grown for wood fiber, and oak forests on the right, which have grown for hundreds of years that are used for high quality timber. Here's investing in the future. Replanting trees following harvest is an example of investment management. And some of the criteria for sustainable forest management, we'll finish with these couple of slides here, and you can fill in these blanks on your last page of your notes. In 1994, delegates from the UN defined a sustainable forest as one that maintains biodiversity, productivity, capacity for regeneration, and the health of forests and forest landscapes for current and future generations. So they talked about biological diversity, where forest management requires this diversity from the level of individual trees to the entire landscape. Productive capacity. The forest should maintain their capacity to produce a full array of forest goods. Ecosystem health and vitality, factors that present risks to species such as insects, disease, fire, land clearance, animal grazing, and air pollutants should be managed. Soil and water resources, global carbon cycles, and socioeconomic benefits. These are all criteria for sustaining forest management. We'll end with this photo, which shows forested buffers along streams in an area that's being logged, and such buffers prevent erosion and protect the water quality. So you can still log the trees, but just sustaining them and managing the forest is extremely important.